The year was 2347, and humanity had finally reached the stars. After centuries of dreaming and decades of struggle, human beings had spread across the galaxy. They had built 17 colonies on distant worlds, and nearly 15 billion people now called space their home. Earth was no longer alone. Humanity had become a species of explorers, dreamers, and builders. Nobody expected what came next. Admiral Catherine Hayes stood on the bridge of her ship, the Earth defense vessel Defiance. She was a tall woman with gray hair and sharp eyes that had seen too many battles. Today those eyes were filled with fear. Through the massive windows of her bridge, she watched as hundreds of alien ships appeared from nowhere. They materialized from hyperspace like ghosts, becoming solid. And each one was bigger than anything humanity had ever built. The Zorvathi had arrived. The Zorvathi. Hegemony was an empire older than human civilization itself. They had ruled over 800 worlds for 10,000 years. They had conquered dozens of species and crushed every enemy that dared to stand against them. And now they had decided that humanity was a threat. Every screen on every human world flickered. The face of High Commander Drelith appeared. He was tall and thin, with gray skin stretched tight over a skull that seemed too large for his body. His eyes were black pools without any light in them. When he spoke, his voice was cold, like the space between stars. "Humans," Drelith said, "you have spread across space without permission. You have built colonies on worlds that belong to the hegemony. You have refused to kneel before your superiors. For these crimes, you will be punished." President Marcus Cole watched from the White House. He was surrounded by his advisors, including Secretary of Defense Linda Patterson and General Samuel Grant. They stood frozen, unable to believe what they were seeing. "The colony world you call New Eden will be destroyed," Drelith continued. 10 billion humans will die today. This will serve as a lesson to your species. In 30 days, you will surrender unconditionally, or we will destroy every human world, one by one. Admiral Hayes screamed orders to her crew. The Defiance and her small escort of 12 ships moved to intercept the Zorvathi fleet, but it was hopeless. The alien armada numbered over 3,000 vessels. Each one was armed with weapons that humanity could barely understand. "All ships, engage," Hayes shouted. "Protect New Eden at all costs." The human ships fought bravely. They fired every weapon they had. They launched missiles and plasma beams and everything in their arsenal. But the Zorvathi shields absorbed every attack like a pond absorbing raindrops. The alien ships did not even slow down, and then the Zorvathi opened fire. The first plasma beam hit the colony ship Guardian. It exploded in a ball of fire, killing 3,000 people instantly. More beams followed. The human escort fleet was destroyed in minutes. The Defiance took a hit that killed half her crew and left her drifting in space. Catherine Hayes lay on the floor of her bridge, blood running down her face. Through the cracked windows, she watched as the Zorvathi fleet surrounded New Eden. The aliens broadcasted everything. Thousands of cameras captured the moment from every angle. They wanted humans everywhere to watch. They wanted the entire galaxy to see what happened to species that defied the hegemony. New Eden was a beautiful world. It had blue oceans and green forests and cities that sparkled in the sunlight. 10 billion people lived there. Families, children, old people who had worked their whole lives. Young people who had their whole lives ahead of them. The Zorvathi destroyed it all in 6 hours. Plasma beams rained down from orbit, turning cities into craters. Antimatter bombs fell like rain, each one powerful enough to destroy a mountain. The oceans boiled. The forests burned. The very air caught fire. On Earth, people watched in horror. In the White House, President Cole gripped the edge of his desk so hard his knuckles turned white. Linda Patterson was crying silently. General Grant stood perfectly still, his face like stone. But his hands were shaking. The screams came through the communication channels. Millions of voices crying out for help that would never come. Parents calling for their children. Children calling for their parents. And then, one by one, the voices fell silent. When it was over, New Eden was nothing but a ball of molten rock. The beautiful blue and green world had become a dead gray sphere. 10 billion human beings had been murdered in 6 hours, and the Zorvathi had made sure everyone watched. High Commander Drelith appeared on the screens again. His lipless mouth curved into something that might have been a smile. "You have 30 days," he said. "Surrender, or every human world will share the same fate. This is the mercy of the hegemony." The transmission ended. For a long moment, nobody spoke. Across human space, people stood in shock. Some wept, some screamed. Some simply stared at nothing, unable to process what they had witnessed. Then President Marcus Cole stood up. He wiped his eyes and straightened his jacket. He walked to the camera that would broadcast his words to every human being in existence. "My fellow humans," he began. His voice was rough with grief, but it did not shake. "Today, we have witnessed the worst crime in human history. 10 billion of our brothers and sisters are dead. The Zorvathi murdered them and made us watch. They expect us to be afraid. They expect us to surrender." He paused. When he spoke again, his voice was harder, cold, determined. "They have made a terrible mistake." Cole leaned closer to the camera. His eyes burned with a fire that had not been there before. "The Zorvathi wanted to teach us fear. Instead, they have taught us hatred. They have united every human being in existence against them. Every nation, every colony, every single person who calls themselves human is now joined in one purpose." He stood tall, his jaw set firm. "To the Zorvathia hegemony, hear me now. We will not surrender. We will not kneel. We will not beg for mercy from monsters who murder children for entertainment. We will come for you. We will find you. And we will make you pay for every single life you have taken." Cole's voice dropped to a whisper that somehow carried more weight than a shout. "Operation Alien Extermination is now in effect, and we will not stop until every last one of you has answered for what you have done today. You wanted to break humanity with fear. You failed. You have created an enemy that will follow you to the edge of the universe. Sleep well, High Commander. We are coming." The broadcast ended. Across human space, the shock began to transform. Grief became anger. Despair became determination. People who had never held a weapon began asking where they could sign up. Scientists who had spent their lives on peaceful research began thinking about weapons. Factory workers started planning how to retool their facilities for war production. The Zorvathi had wanted to crush human spirit. Instead, they had forged it into something harder than any metal. They had given humanity a purpose that united billions of people across hundreds of light dash years in the damaged bridge of the Defiance. Admiral Hayes pulled herself to her feet. She looked at the molten remains of New Eden through her cracked windows. "We're going to make them pay," she whispered. "Every single one of them." The war had begun. The 30 days the Zorvathi had granted became 30 days of fury, deep beneath the Rocky Mountains. In a facility that did not officially exist, Dr. Nathan Pierce had not slept in 4 days. He was a thin man with messy brown hair and glasses that kept sliding down his nose. Before the attack on New Eden, he had spent his career developing weapons that humanity hoped would never be used. Now, every restriction had been lifted. "We always held back," Nathan told his lead researcher. Dr. Caroline Webb. She was a young woman with tired eyes and coffee stains on her lab coat. "We were afraid of what we might become. We worried about ethics, about consequences, about the future." He turned to look at the weapon designs on his screen. Things that had only existed in theory were now being built. "That fear is gone now," he said quietly. "The Zorvathi killed 10 billion people and smiled while doing it. Whatever we become to stop them, it will be worth it." Carolyn nodded. She had lost her brother on New Eden, her nephew. She did not need convincing. Across the planet, humanity mobilized with a unity that had never existed before. Countries that had been enemies for centuries now worked together. Political leaders who had spent years fighting each other now sat at the same tables, planning the survival of their species. Every factory that could be converted to military production was converted. Car factories started building tanks. Electronics companies started making targeting systems. Shipyards that had built passenger vessels were now building warships. People worked double shifts, triple shifts. Whatever it took, Admiral Catherine Hayes had been promoted to Fleet Admiral and given command of all human military forces. She established her headquarters on Mars, far from Earth. In a facility that could survive even if the homeworld fell, she stood before a holographic display, showing everything humanity knew about the Zorvathi hegemony. 800 worlds, countless ships, trillions of soldiers, an empire that had crushed every enemy for 10,000 years. Her aide, Commander Daniel Porter, studied the display with a grim expression. He was a young man, barely 30, but the last few weeks had aged him. Everyone looked older now. "The numbers are not good, Admiral," he said. "We are outnumbered at least 1,000. 2-1. Their technology is centuries ahead of ours. Their experience in warfare spans millennia. Numbers mean nothing if we fight smart," Hayes replied. She pointed to the display. "The Zorvathi have ruled for 10,000 years. They have grown comfortable, lazy. They expect every species to fight the same way, to make the same mistakes, to break under the same pressure." She smiled, but there was no warmth in it. "We are going to surprise them." In secret facilities across human space, new weapons took shape. The Prometheus array was a network of satellites that could focus solar energy into beams powerful enough to cut through mountains. The void bombs were devices that tore holes in the fabric of space itself, sucking everything nearby into nothingness. The Spectre system was stealth, technology so advanced that human ships could pass within meters of enemy sensors without being detected. But the most terrifying development came from an unexpected source. Dr. Alina Morris was a xenobiologist. Before the war, she had studied alien life forms, trying to understand the diversity of species in the galaxy. Now, she studied the Zorvathi for a very different reason. She worked in a laboratory filled with alien bodies. Some had been recovered from the ships destroyed in the battle over New Eden. Others came from Zorvathi outposts that human special forces had raided in the weeks since the attack. Alina examined tissue samples under her microscope. She ran genetic tests. She analyzed blood chemistry and cellular structure, and slowly she began to understand. "They have a weakness," she reported to the War Council 3 weeks after the attack. President Cole, Admiral Hayes, and a dozen other leaders watched her presentation with desperate hope. "The Zorvathi evolved on a world with very stable conditions," Alina explained. "Their immune systems never had to fight off rapid mutations or aggressive diseases. They are remarkably vulnerable to certain types of pathogens." She pulled up a diagram showing a complex molecular structure. "I have designed a biological agent specifically tailored to Zorvathi biology. It spreads through air and water. It has a long incubation period, so by the time symptoms appear, it has already spread to countless hosts. And it is 100% fatal to Zorvathi. It will not affect humans or any other known species." The room was silent. Everyone understood what she was proposing. "We were talking about genocide," Secretary Patterson said quietly. "I am talking about survival," Alina replied. Her voice was steady, but her hands were shaking. "They killed 10 billion of us. They promised to kill the rest. If we do not stop them, humanity will be extinct within a year." General Grant spoke up. "How long would it take to affect their entire population?" "Months. Perhaps years. The hegemony spans 800 worlds. But once it reaches critical mass, there will be no stopping it." President Cole stood and walked to the window. He looked out at the night sky, at the stars that humanity had finally reached, only to find monsters waiting. "I never wanted to be the man who made this decision," he said softly. "I wanted to be remembered for building things, not destroying them." He turned back to face the room. "But I will not let humanity die because I was too afraid to do what was necessary. Develop the pathogen. Prepare everything. We launch in 29 days. The council dispersed to make preparations. Only Admiral Hayes remained. "Are you sure about this, sir?" she asked. Cole shook his head slowly. "No, I am not sure about anything anymore. But I am sure that if we do nothing, we die. I would rather live with the guilt of survival than die with clean hands." Far away, on the Zorvathi homeworld of Zorvax Prime, High Commander Dralith received reports about increased human activity. His advisors warned him that the primitives seemed to be preparing for war instead of surrender. Dralith laughed. "Let them prepare," he said. "What can they possibly accomplish in 30 days? We have conquered species far more advanced than them. We have destroyed civilizations that lasted millions of years. These humans are nothing but insects pretending to be warriors." He waved a dismissive hand. "When the 30 days are up, we will crush them. We will burn their worlds and scatter their ashes across the void. And the galaxy will remember what happens to those who defy the hegemony." His advisors bowed and agreed. None of them dared to suggest that perhaps they should take the humans more seriously. None of them could imagine that the insects were building weapons beyond their darkest nightmares in his lab beneath the mountains. Dr. Nathan Pierce completed the final design for the void bombs in her facility on the moon. Dr. Alina Morris watched the first batch of the pathogen being produced. In her headquarters on Mars, Admiral Hayes finalized the battle plans that would send human ships deep into enemy territory. The storm was gathering. In 29 days, it would break, and the Zorvathi had no idea what was coming. Day 30 arrived with cold silence. The Zorvathi armada assembled at the edge of human space, exactly as they had promised. 3,000 warships hung in the darkness like a wall of death. Each vessel bristled with weapons that could crack planets and burn cities from orbit. High Commander Dralith stood on the bridge of his flagship. Waiting for the surrender that he was certain would come, he broadcast his message across all human frequencies. His black eyes showed no emotion as he spoke. "Your time has ended, humans. Surrender now, and we will grant you quick deaths. Resist, and we will make your suffering last for generations. The choice is yours." He waited for the response. He expected begging, crying, perhaps some futile attempt at negotiation. What he got was fire, Admiral. Hayes had positioned her visible forces in a defensive line around Earth's solar system. 200 ships faced the Zorvathi armada, hopelessly outnumbered. The aliens saw exactly what they expected to see. A desperate last stand. A weak enemy about to be crushed, they did not see the 300 ships approaching from behind. For 28 days, that strike force had traveled through uncharted space, circling around the galaxy to approach from the direction the Zorvathi least expected. They had traveled in complete silence, using experimental engines that left no trace. They had endured cramped conditions, limited food, and the constant fear of discovery. Captain Stephen Morris commanded the lead vessel, the Retribution. He was a stocky man with a shaved head and a scar across his left cheek. He had lost his wife and 2 daughters on New Eden. Every member of his crew had lost someone. They had all volunteered for this mission, knowing they would probably not survive. None of them cared. "All ships," Morris broadcast on the encrypted channel. "This is it. Remember New Eden. Remember why we are here. Weapons free." The first volley of void bombs tore through the rear of the Zorvathi formation. The aliens had never seen anything like it. One moment, dozens of their massive warships were there. The next moment, they simply ceased to exist. The void bombs created collapsing pockets of twisted space that pulled everything nearby into nothingness. Ships, crews, weapons, everything vanished as if it had never been. Draloff's confident expression shattered like glass. He screamed orders, trying to reorganize his fleet, but the chaos was total. The Zorvathi were not prepared for an attack from behind. They had never needed to be. No species had ever dared to strike first against the hegemony. The humans pressed their advantage. While the enemy fleet turned to face the attack from the rear, Admiral Hayes ordered the defensive line to advance. "All ships, full attack," she commanded from her flagship, the Vengeance. "Make them pay." And then the Prometheus array activated, hidden among the asteroids of the outer solar system. A network of satellites locked onto their targets. Solar energy focused through massive lenses, concentrated into beams of pure destruction. The first beam struck a Zorvathi battleship through its center, coring it like an apple. The ship exploded, taking 2 other vessels with it. More beams followed. The Zorvathi shields, which had stopped every human weapon before, could not handle this much focused energy. Ships that had seemed invincible began to die. The battle lasted 18 hours. It was brutal. It was bloody. The humans fought with desperate fury, knowing that defeat meant extinction. The Zorvathi fought with shocked disbelief. Unable to understand how these primitive insects were hurting them, Captain Morris drove the Retribution deep into the enemy formation, firing every weapon he had. His ship took hit after hit, but he kept fighting. When his main weapons failed, he used missiles. When his missiles ran out, he rammed his crippled vessel into a Zorvathi cruiser. Destroying both ships, his last words were broadcast to the entire human fleet. For New Eden. The Zorvathi had lost 2,000 ships and 3 million soldiers. Human losses were severe. Nearly half the strike force was destroyed. 40,000 humans died in those 18 hours. But the impossible had happened. Humanity had won. Admiral Hayes appeared on screens across human space. Behind her, the wreckage of the Zorvathi fleet tumbled through the void. Pieces of alien ships drifted past her window, testament to what humanity had accomplished. "This is not victory," she announced. Her voice was tired but firm. "This is only the beginning. Today we prove that the Zorvae can be beaten. Tomorrow we prove that they can be destroyed. We will not stop. We will not rest. Until every drop of blood they spilled has been repaid, we will keep fighting." On Zorvax Prime, panic spread for the first time in 10,000. In years, the hegemony had never lost a major battle. They had never retreated. They had never known fear. Now they knew all three. High Commander Drelith retreated to his fortress with the survivors of his fleet. He demanded reinforcements from across the Empire, stripping garrisons from 100 worlds to rebuild his armada. He would crush these humans with overwhelming force. He would make them suffer as no species had ever suffered before. But while Drelith focused on the obvious war, humanity struck in the shadows. In the chaos of the Zorvathi retreat, small human vessels had slipped through their lines. Special operations teams landed on 3 Zorvathi worlds. Their mission was simple: deploy the pathogen that Dr. Alina Morris had created. Major Christopher Blake led the team on Zorvax Secondary, the hegemony's primary military shipyard. He was a lean man, with cold blue eyes and the calm demeanor of someone who had long ago accepted death. His squad of 12 soldiers were the best humanity had. Every one of them had volunteered, knowing it was likely a one-way trip. They landed in the darkness of the planet's night side, their stealth shuttle invisible to alien sensors. They moved through the industrial complex like ghosts, avoiding patrols, disabling cameras, eliminating guards silently when necessary. The target was the atmospheric processing center. Every building on Zorvax Secondary drew air from this central facility. Whatever entered the system would spread to every corner of the planet within days. "We are at the objective," Blake reported via quantum-encrypted communication. His voice was barely a whisper. The squad secured the room while their technical specialist, Sergeant Amy Rhodes, prepared the pathogen for deployment. She was a small woman with steady hands and a brilliant mind. She worked quickly, attaching the dispersal unit to the main air intake. "Package is ready," she said. Blake nodded. "Deploy it." Rhodes pressed the button. A soft hiss was the only sound as billions of microscopic organisms entered the air supply. They were invisible, undetectable by any known technology. And they were patient. The pathogen would spread slowly at first. It would infect hosts without causing symptoms for months. By the time the Zorvathi realized something was wrong, it would be too late. The disease would have spread to countless worlds through normal travel and trade. "Package deployed," Blake reported. "Extraction in progress." Getting out was harder than getting in. A patrol spotted them near the landing zone. Alarms sounded. Zorvathi soldiers converged on their position from every direction. The squad fought their way to the shuttle. Through a storm of plasma fire, they moved and shot and moved again, covering each other. leaving dead aliens in their wake. But the Zorvathi kept coming. Private Tommy Lucas was hit first, plasma burning through his chest. Corporal Diana Walsh dragged his body to cover before realizing he was already dead. She was hit moments later. One by one, the squad fell. They did not surrender. They did not retreat. They bought time with their lives for the others to reach the shuttle. When the craft finally lifted off, only 4 soldiers remained: Major Blake, Sergeant Rhodes, and 2 others. They watched the planet fall away beneath them, knowing that their fallen comrades had not died in vain. The pathogen was spreading. In the weeks and months to come, it would reach a dozen worlds. Then 100. Then more. The countdown to extinction had begun, and the Zorvathi did not even know it. Back on Earth, Admiral Hayes received Blake's report with grim satisfaction. "Is Phase 1 complete?" she told President Cole. "Now we wait." Cole nodded slowly. "And while we wait?" Hayes smiled, and there was something dangerous in her eyes. "While we wait, we keep killing them. We remind them every single day what happens when you murder 10 billion humans. We make them afraid to sleep." The war was only beginning. Months passed, and the war that the Zorvathi expected to last days stretched into a grinding campaign of blood and fire. Human fleets struck at the edges of the hegemony like wolves hunting a wounded giant. They hit supply lines and vanished before reinforcements could arrive. They destroyed resource depots and manufacturing centers. They raided outposts and freed slave species who had served the Zorvathi for centuries. Admiral Hayes had studied every war in human history. She knew that humanity could not win a direct confrontation against the full might of the hegemony, so she refused to fight that kind of war. "We make them bleed," she explained to her commanders at a strategy meeting on Mars. "A ship here, a convoy there, we stretch their forces thin. We make them protect everything, which means they can protect nothing." Commander Daniel Porter pointed to the holographic map showing Zorvathi space. Red markers indicated human strikes over the past 6 months. There were hundreds of them, scattered across a vast area. "They have more ships than we do," Porter said. "But they also have 800 worlds to protect. We only need to protect a handful. The math is on our side, as long as we stay patient." Hayes nodded. "And while we chip away at their forces, the pathogen does the rest." Reports had begun coming in from across the hegemony. Something strange was happening on Zorvathi worlds. Soldiers were growing weak. Workers were collapsing. Entire cities were going silent, their communications dead, their populations mysteriously ill. The pathogen that Dr. Alina Morris created was doing exactly what she had designed it to do. It spread slowly, invisibly, jumping from host to host through casual contact. It incubated for months before causing symptoms. By the time anyone realized they were infected, they had already passed it to dozens of others. High Commander Drelith sat in his fortress on Zorvax Prime, receiving reports that made his gray skin turn pale. 200 worlds had reported outbreaks. The disease killed 9 out of every 10 who caught it, and nothing they tried could stop it. How is this possible? He demanded of his chief scientist, a trembling Zorvathi named Veron. "We have the most advanced medical technology in the galaxy. We have cured diseases that wiped out entire species. Why can we not stop this?" Veron could barely meet his commander's black eyes. "The pathogen is unlike anything we have ever seen. It seems specifically designed to attack our biology. It targets our cells with perfect precision, almost as if someone engineered it to kill only Zorvathi." Drelif's hand shot out and grabbed Veron by the throat. "Are you telling me the humans created this?" "It is the only explanation that makes sense," Veron gasped. "They must have developed it from our own genetic material. The samples they captured from our dead soldiers." Drelith released the scientist and stood in stunned silence. He had dismissed the humans as primitives, insects, animals who could be crushed without effort. And now, those primitives were destroying his empire with a weapon he could not fight. "Find a cure," he commanded. "Use every resource we have, and increase the bounty on human ships. I want their scientists captured alive. They will tell us how to stop this plague, or they will suffer beyond imagination." But the humans were not easy to capture. Their new stealth technology made their ships nearly invisible. They appeared from nowhere, struck hard, and vanished before the Zorvathi could respond. Captain Lisa Chen commanded one of these stealth vessels, the Shadow. She was a tall woman with long black hair and the steady nerves of someone who had flown impossible missions her entire career. Her ship was equipped with the latest Spectre system, making it invisible to all known sensors. Her mission was the most dangerous yet: infiltrate Zorvax Prime itself and gather intelligence on the hegemony's command. Structure: the Shadow slipped past the defensive perimeter without being detected. For 3 weeks, Lisa and her crew lurked in orbit above the Zorvathi homeworld, intercepting communications, mapping defenses, and recording everything they observed. What she learned was both encouraging and terrifying. The pathogen had reached Zorvax Prime. Even Dralith himself was showing early symptoms. According to intercepted medical reports, the hegemony was dying, slowly but surely. But in his desperation, Dralith had authorized the construction of a weapon that chilled Lisa's blood. They called it the Annihilator. It was a ship so massive it dwarfed anything humanity had ever seen, nearly 50 kilometers long. Its primary weapon was designed to do something that should have been impossible: destroy a star. The idea was simple and horrifying. The Annihilator would travel to Earth's solar system and trigger a chain reaction in the sun. The explosion would sterilize every planet in the system. Billions would die in an instant. Humanity's homeworld would be erased from existence. If we cannot defeat them, Dralith had proclaimed to his war council, we will burn their sun and let them freeze in the darkness. We will show the galaxy what happens to those who defy us, even if it is the last thing we ever do. Lisa recorded everything. She gathered data on the Annihilator's construction, its defenses, its weaknesses. She mapped the shipyard where it was being built and calculated how long before it would be complete. 6 months. Humanity had 6 months before the Zorvathi could destroy their sun. Getting this information back to Earth was almost as dangerous as gathering it. The Shadow's departure was detected by a patrol that had not been there before. Zorvathi hunters pursued her across 3 star systems. Lisa ran her ship harder than it was designed to go. She pushed the engines past their limits. She dove through asteroid fields and skimmed the edges of gas giants, using every trick she knew to shake her pursuers. When she finally reached human space, the Shadow was crippled. The engines were burned out. Half the hull was cracked. 3 of her crew members were dead from injuries sustained during the pursuit, but the information she carried would determine the fate of humanity. Admiral Hayes called an emergency council when she received Lisa's report. President Cole, now gray-haired and exhausted after 2 years of war, listened as the intelligence officer presented her findings. The Annihilator will be completed in 6 months, Lisa said. Her arm was in a sling, and she had refused medical treatment until after the briefing. Once it is operational, nothing we have can stop it. They will destroy our sun, and we will all die. The room was silent. After everything they had accomplished, after all the victories and sacrifices, the Zorvathi still had a weapon that could end them. Then we do not let them complete it, Hayes said firmly. We launch everything we have at Zorvax Prime. One massive strike at the heart of their empire. We kill Dralith, destroy the Annihilator, and let the pathogen finish the rest. General Samuel Grant shook his head. The defenses around Zorvax Prime are massive. We would lose most of our fleet. We'd lose our fleet either way if that weapon fires, Hayes replied. This is our only chance. We hit them before they are ready. We end this war now. President Cole stood and walked to the window. He had aged 20 years in the past, too. The weight of 10 billion deaths still pressed on his shoulders, and now he had to decide whether to risk everything on one final gamble. How many ships? He asked without turning around. Every ship we have, Hayes answered. 700 vessels. 2 million soldiers. Everything. Cole turned to face the room. His eyes were tired but determined. Launch Operation Final Judgment. We finish this. Cross human space. The call went out. Every ship, every soldier, every pilot prepared for the final battle. They knew the odds were against them. They knew many would not return, but they remembered New Eden. They remembered the screams of 10 billion voices falling silent. They remembered why they were fighting, and they were not afraid. The largest fleet humanity had ever assembled gathered in the shadow of Jupiter. 700 warships hung in formation, their hulls gleaming in the distant sunlight. Aboard those vessels were 2 million soldiers who had kissed their families goodbye, knowing they might never return. They carried every weapon humanity had developed over 2 years of desperate innovation. This was everything. The final gamble. The last roll of the dice. Admiral Catherine Hayes stood on the bridge of her flagship, the Vengeance. She looked older than her years, worn down by the weight of command and the ghosts of everyone she had lost. But her eyes still burned with the same fire that had kept her fighting since New Eden. She activated the fleet-wide communication channel. Her voice would reach every ship, every soldier, every soul about to go into battle. 2 years ago, she began, the Zorvathi murdered 10 billion of our people and made us watch. They wanted to break us. They wanted to teach us fear. They wanted to show the galaxy that humanity would kneel like every other species before us. She paused, letting the silence stretch. They were wrong. Her voice grew stronger. We did not break. We did not kneel. We fought back with everything we had. We proved that humans do not surrender. We proved that humans do not forget. And today, we prove that humans do not lose. She straightened her shoulders and stared at the stars. For everyone we have lost, for New Eden, for Earth, for humanity, no mercy, no retreat, no surrender. The response came from 700 ships. 2 million voices united in one word, for New Eden. The fleet jumped to hyperspace. They emerged in the Zorvac system to find the Zorvathi waiting for them. High Commander Dralith had fortified his homeworld with every ship he could gather. Nearly 2,000 vessels surrounded Zorvac's prime like a shield of metal and fire. On paper, the aliens still had the advantage. But the Zorvathi were dying. The pathogen had ravaged their crews. Ships that should have carried thousands were manned by hundreds. Weapon systems malfunctioned because there were not enough healthy workers to maintain them. The hegemony's legendary discipline had crumbled as soldiers watched their comrades sicken and die around them. Dralith himself was dying. The disease had reached him despite every precaution. His gray skin had turned almost white. He could barely stand without assistance. But he refused to leave his command post. If the hegemony fell, he would fall with it. Destroy them all, he commanded, his voice weak but filled with hatred. Let history remember that we fought to the last. The battle began. Plasma beams lit up the darkness. Missiles streaked across the void. Ships exploded in balls of fire that bloomed and died in the vacuum of space. The Zorvathi fought with the desperation of the doomed, knowing that defeat meant extinction. But humanity fought with something more powerful than desperation. They fought with purpose. They fought with rage. They fought with 2 years of grief transformed into an unstoppable force. Admiral Hayes commanded the battle from the Vengeance, coordinating the assault with cold precision. She sent squadrons to exploit weaknesses in the enemy formation. She pulled back damaged ships before they could be destroyed. She kept pressure on the enemy without wasting her forces, and in the chaos of battle, a small strike team penetrated the Zorvathi defensive perimeter. Major Christopher Blake had survived the pathogen deployment 2 years ago. He had spent the time since training for this moment. 50 soldiers followed him in an assault shuttle designed to look like debris, invisible among the wreckage of battle. Their target was the Annihilator. The massive superweapon loomed ahead of them, still under construction but nearly complete. Its main weapon could destroy Earth's sun. If they failed, nothing else mattered. Humanity would die in darkness. All teams, weapons ready, Blake commanded. We get one shot at this. The shuttle docked with the Annihilator through an unguarded maintenance port. Blake led his soldiers through corridors that seemed to stretch forever. The ship was so large that running from one section to another took precious minutes. They encountered dying Zorvathi along the way. Soldiers too weak to fight, workers collapsed at their stations. Officers coughing blood as the pathogen consumed them from within. Blake felt no satisfaction. This was not revenge. This was survival. They reached the power core at the heart of the vessel. It was a massive chamber filled with energy conduits and control systems. The beating heart of a weapon designed to murder stars. "Set the charges," Blake ordered. Technical Sergeant Amy Rhodes, who had survived the first mission alongside Blake, worked quickly. She planted explosives at critical points throughout the chamber, enough to trigger a chain reaction that would tear the ship apart. "Charges set," she reported. 5 minutes to detonation. It did not have 5 minutes. Alarms began to wail. A Zorvathi elite guard unit had been stationed nearby, warriors healthy enough to fight despite the plague. They converged on the power core from 3 directions. The firefight was savage. Blake's soldiers took cover behind support pillars and equipment housings, returning fire against enemies who outnumbered them 4-1. The Zorvathi were weak, but they were also desperate. They knew what the humans were trying to do. One by one, Blake's soldiers fell. Private Jake Simmons was hit first, plasma burning through his armor. Lieutenant Maria Santos dragged 2 wounded comrades to cover before being cut down herself. The air filled with smoke and screams and the constant thunder of weapons. With 2 minutes left on the timer, only Blake and Rhodes remained. They huddled behind a failing piece of cover, surrounded by the bodies of friends, while Zorvathi soldiers closed in from every direction. "It has been an honor," Sergeant Blake said. Rhodes checked her weapon. She had 3 shots left for New Eden, sir. The timer reached 0. The Annihilator exploded from within, its power core detonating in a catastrophic chain reaction. The blast was visible from space, a new star born and dying in seconds. The superweapon that was meant to destroy humanity's sun was instead destroyed by 50 soldiers who had known they were not coming home on the Vengeance. Admiral Hayes watched the explosion with grim satisfaction. The superweapon was gone. Now for the final objective, the human fleet pushed through the shattered Zorvathi defenses toward Dralith's fortress. The High Commander's personal guard fought to the death, but it was not enough. Human soldiers breached the walls, cutting through the last resistance. Commander Daniel Porter led the assault team that found Dralith. The once mighty ruler of 800 worlds sat on his throne, barely able to stand. His black eyes were dim, his breath rattled in his chest, his hands trembled with fever. "You have won," Dralith whispered. "But at what cost? You have become monsters. You have committed genocide against my people." Porter looked at the alien who had ordered the deaths of 10 billion innocents. He felt no satisfaction, no triumph, just a tired emptiness. "No," he replied. "We ensured survival, yours and ours. We proved to the galaxy that there are consequences for cruelty, that some species do not kneel." Dralith laughed, a weak and bitter sound. "You think other species will thank you? They will fear you. They will look at what you have done and see the same evil you claim to fight." "Let them fear," Porter said quietly. "Better feared than dead." Dralith was taken prisoner, the only member of the Zorvathi High Command to survive the war. He would spend his remaining days in a human facility, watching his empire collapse. Watching the species he had dismissed as primitives rebuild and expand into the vacuum, the hegemony. Left behind, the war officially ended 3 months later. The pathogen had reduced the Zorvathi population by 90%. Their empire fragmented as subject races broke free after centuries of oppression. Humanity, once confined to a handful of worlds, now stood as a major power in the galactic community. Admiral Hayes retired to a small house on Earth, overlooking the Pacific Ocean. She never gave interviews. She never wrote memoirs. When asked about the war, she would simply say, "We did what we had to do. I hope we never have to do it again." In the rebuilt capital city of New Washington, a memorial stood in the central plaza. 10 billion names were engraved on walls of black marble, surrounding a single flame that would burn forever. People came from across human space to visit, to remember. To grieve at the base of the memorial, an inscription read, They thought they could break us with fear. They were wrong. For every soul lost on New Eden, for every child who never grew old, for every dream that burned with our world, we remember, we endure, we prevail. Never again. Humanity had looked into the void of extinction and refused to blink. They had done terrible things in the name of survival. They had unleashed weapons that killed billions. They had become something harder, darker, more dangerous than they had been before. Whether that made them heroes or monsters was a question philosophers would debate for centuries. But they were alive. Their children would grow up under open skies. Their species would continue, spreading across the stars that had once seemed so hostile, and they would never, ever forget 10 billion candles burned in the darkness. One for every soul lost on New Eden, and humanity stood guard, ready to do whatever was necessary to ensure. Those candles would never be joined by billions more. The universe had learned a simple lesson. Humanity was not to be trifled with. Some species kneel when faced with extinction. Some species beg for mercy. Some species accept their fate with quiet dignity. Humans are not one of those species, and the galaxy would never forget it.